Tefilla.
Exactly. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning PESACHIM Daf Kuf Zayin. The first part of the Amud Aleph is speaking about the concept of Chamar Medina as it relates to Havdalah, as it relates even to Kiddush. We're going to continue where we left off, which is 7 lines into the wide lines, Tanu Rabbanan. We're going to quote a baraisa that speaks about the uniqueness of wine, as we mentioned at the end of yesterday's shir, that even though for Havdalah, we paskin that one may say Havdalah over Chamar Medina, however that's defined, it's certainly not lechatchila. Lechatchila, we should make Havdalah dafka over wine. We're going to be learning about how much wine must one drink from the Koshel Bracha. We're going to speak out the 3-way machlokes rishonim as to who is the one that needs to drink the wine? The reciter, Shitas Hagoinim, Shitas Rashbam here. It doesn't have to be the reciter. It can be even anyone who listened. And by the way, that's the source when we are in the 9 days. And again, we are medagdei to make Havdalah dafka over wine. During the 9 days, we do not drink wine. So if there is a child that's old enough to be educated in making brachas, does not yet understand or appreciate the concept of the morning of the Churban Abayis, he or she will be the one that will drink from the wine. The listener will drink of the wine of Havdalah. That's the Rashbam. Then we're going to learn the sheet of Tosfos that's going to hold that it doesn't even have to be consumed by one person. It can be distributed, and if the sum total of everyone who both said it and the ones who listened will amount to the minimum of wine that needs to be consumed, that's also okay. And then still on the Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, we're going to go back to the Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek, the Mishnah Daf Tzaddik Tes Amud Beis, that introduces the Isur Midrabanan to eat Erev Pesach Samuch LeMincha. Now, as we spoke out when we learned the Mishnah, we have what we call Mincha Gedolah, which is, as we learned on Daf Nun Ches, the earliest time that the Tamid Shel Bein Habayim begins to be brought, which is 30 minutes after noon. We'll call that 12:30, even though we are speaking always about Sha'is Maniyas. Then we have what we call Mincha Ketana. Mincha Ketana is 3.5 hours into the afternoon, what we would call 3:30 p.m., which is the common time when the Mincha was brought. We also learned that Samuch LeMincha means 30 minutes prior. When we learned the Mishnah, we already spoke out the Rishonim, which is speaking out the Gemara here, that really the Mishnah means Samuch LeMincha Ketana, but this will be the sugya. The Gemara is going to ask, is the Isur Samuch LeMincha Gedolah, Samuch LeMincha Ketana, will give Sfaris why it might mean this or why it might mean that. And ultimately, we will learn that in as much as we have an Isur Midrabanan to have a Su'udah, Su'udah is comprised of a product made out of the 5 grains, out of bread, and as we learned the Tosfos in the Mishnah, that refers to matzah ashira, because let's not forget the Isur Midrabanan, not to eat matzah Erev Pesach, aside of the minig Chabad is we don't already have it from Shushan Purim, 30 days prior. But matzah ashira, any matzah which may not be used to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah, is not included in this Isur Derabanan. Right, the Yerushalmi says that kol ha'oichel matzah on Erev Pesach is keilu boil arusasei bebeis chama v'chulei. However, says the Gemara that certain refreshments dafke should be consumed Erev Pesach in the afternoon because of the concept that there's that eating, at least nashing, eating light foods open up the appetite. And the same thing we will conclude Daf Kuf Zayin with wine. That wine has the koyach to open up one's appetite. And if we'll have time, it's short daf, and we'll speak out the story of the holy Baal Shem Tov that was making his way to the Holy Land. And part of that story entails of the Baal Shem Tov drinking a lot of wine out of Pesach because of the Gemara, PESACHIM Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Beis. Okay, Chevra, so Nachamal, we're going to start 7 lines into the wide lines. Tanu Rabbanan. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'achol nivei dvarim. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a baraisa, Ei mekachin el al hayayin. In other words, to emphasize, do not use Chamar HaMedina. The ein mevarchin el al hayayin. The literal taich is, don't make a bracha on the beverage other than on wine. And obviously, it can't mean that. So the Gemara interrupts the baraisa. What? Atu hashichra. But behold, on beer, or even va'amaya, or on water, mi loy mivarchino no layu shahakol nihi yabedvarei. What do you mean that ein mivarchen el alayayin? So Amar Abaya hachi ka'amar ein oimrim have koishul bracha levarech. That when you are not only for kiddush, any koishul bracha, according to this brayso, if you want to make a mitzvah over a kois, birchas hamazon, and by the way, this includes havdalah, any koishul bracha, this Tana holds you can only do it ela ala yayin. Tana Ramana, we learned in a brayso, ein mekachin ala sheikha, don't make kiddush over beer. We're speaking here about date beer. Mishum Rabbi Zajac bar Rabbi Shimon amru, that yes, that you can be mekadosh on date beer. In other words, we see clearly that there is a machloikis, even tanoim, whether a beverage that is going to be considered chamar medina may be used even for kiddush. So that's the mirakotza elakotz. Either don't use chamar medina, not even for avdallah, for no koishal bracha, and the other side is that you can make kiddush on chamar medina. Another statement, right? This is all in the name of Rabbi Zajac bar Rabbi Shimon, that mata emes yayin kolshu, that when you taste, when after you make the bracha on a koishal bracha, you make a boire priyagofen, how much should you consume? Any amount suffices. Now, chavra, let's remember something. When it comes b'chlal to brichas hanahenen, when it comes to the bracha prior, there aren't minimum amounts. When you want to drink even just a little bit, you make a bracha. You have shiurim to have to make a bracha achrayna. And if you didn't eat or drink that amount, if you only consumed less, then you won't make a bracha achrayna. However, by a koishal bracha, it's amazing. But if we're going to view it mamish like stam birchas hanahenen, the bode priyagofen, then that will be the shita. You don't have to have a minimum amount. You can have any amount. However, Rabbi Yosi bar Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, no. That when you are making a bracha over a koishal bracha, when you're doing a mitzvah over a koishal bracha and you're making a bode priyagofen, you have to have meloy lugma. Meloy lugma means liquid that fills up a cheek full of liquid. Says Tosfos, this is very important, the second to last Tosfos in the Amid. How much is that in relation to the more commonly used shiur of a revius? The nira shahu roiv revius. That's the roiv revius. And indeed, we paskin that way, that you have to have a revius, but you don't have to drink all of it. Even though, by the way, when it comes to the seder, it's definitely ideal by the dalet koises to drink all of the cup. But that's a unique din of the dalet koises. B'chlal, by a koisha bracha, you have to make a bracha over a revius of, let's speak about ideal for sure, yayin, but how much do you have to drink? Not all of it, but a cheekful, which means the majority of the cup, roiv revius. Okay. Now, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, and v'chein tanei, we learned in a brayso quoting Rav Gidel de Mineresh that hamekadesh v'toyim meloy lugma then yotza. Look how important it is. Ve'im lav lo yotza. Wow. It's mamish essential. It's ma'akiv even post facto. Look inside the Rashbam, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Ve'im lav lo yotza says that Rashbam v'hache hilchase, that if you didn't drink, you're not yoitza. Now, guys, let's not forget that we quoted yesterday the 3-way machlekes rishonim on the brayso of Zocher Esem Shabbos Lekachay, Zoichreu Alayayin, right? Only one shita subscribes, right? The Mefaresh and Nazib, maybe other, but it's not the commonly accepted shita that being Mekadesh on Yayin is the De'oiraisa. Let's make that clear. According to Tosfos that we learned, Tosfos says clearly that even if holding a cup while making kiddush is a din da'oraisa, so holds Tosfos, but making a bracha and drinking it is a din da'rabanan. So just to make it clear, according to that shita, and certainly the shita that holds that the whole concept of having wine is da'rabanan, when we are learning today that if you did not drink the maloi lugma, you're not yoitza, it doesn't mean that you would not yoitza kiddush midoiraisa. If midoiraisa, you don't have to drink the wine, there's no issue. It means that you are not yoitza midrabanan. Now, what the Rashbam adds is gavaldik. For who shalei toam echad min hamasubin? Who has to drink the wine? not the reciter. That Rashbam holds that the drinking could be done by anyone who is listening to the Yoitza. Like we mentioned, that's our minig, as it says in Luach, when it comes to the 9 days. Dafka making Kiddush over wine, and who's going to drink it? Echad min hamasubin, like we spoke about the minor, that he gave l'chlal chinuch brachos, but not l'chlal chinuch of mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. Now we do have other, the sheet that's known as the sheet of the Gaonim, that they don't accept the sheet. They don't say that anyone who listens can drink. They hold that dafka, the reciter, has to be the one drinking. And then you have an Eruvin, you have a Tosfos that holds that not the opposite side doesn't have to be the reciter. And more than that, it doesn't have to be one person. So if you make Kiddush and you drink a little bit, and then you can minhagenu, which is mitzvah min mufchar, that everyone should also drink a little bit. Right? Let's put aside the concept of pigima, like we spoke about yesterday, also 2 days ago. But everyone will drink a little bit. If collectively the amount of roiv revi'is, says Tosfos, or meloy lugma was consumed, then it's oichid good. These are the 3 shittas. Come on, back inside the Gemara. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. You just quoted Rav Huna Amar Rav, and they Tanei Rav Gidel from Min Neresh. Now, really, there were 3 Rav Gidels. So he says, I want you to know that I also have in his Torah Shebal Pen, his tradition, Rav Nachman by Yitzchak also had this statement in the name of Rav Gidel, but he didn't quote it in the name of Rav Gidel from Neresh. V'loy Gidel bar Menashe. He didn't have the specific Rav Gidel. Now there's Gidel bar Menashe, there's Gidel bar Menyume, there's also Gidel min Neresh. So Rav Nachman by Yitzchak says, I don't have in my tradition exactly which Rav Gidel was the one that Taka Paskind, right? That I'm a Kaddish, v'loy Tam, v'loy Lugma, you're not Yoitze. I only have a Gidel Stama. In other words, it can be any one of these 3. Who cares? So the Gemara explains, L'may nafkamina, l'mirma didei adidei. Oh, it's if we would know for sure which Rav Gidel made the statement, if someone else would have another statement said in the name of the same Rav Gidel, then we would have a contradiction, and that would force us to say that one of the 2 traditions became corrupted, which is part of what we do in the Gemara. We point out contradictions, and sometimes, samei mikan, we erase a baraisa. We come to the conclusion that baraisa has to be changed. But all Rav Nachman by Yitzchak is saying is that I don't know for sure if what you're quoting is in the name of Rav Gidel min Neresh. Maybe it was quoted by another Rav Gidel. And therefore, maybe if you find a contradiction of Rav Gidel min Neresh, it won't, so to say, prove that this statement is unauthentic. This can be authentic because one of the 3 Rav Gidels indeed paskind as we do, that Hamakadosh, V'loy Toim, V'loy Lugma, only then are you Yotza, and V'im Lav is Lo Yotzam. All right. Now, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid, we are going back to the Mishnah. And Daf Tzadik Tesamid Beis, Arvei Pesachim, or Erev Pesachim, opened up with the Takanas Chachamim not to have a meal of Matzah Ashira, as we spoke out on the Tosfos. Samuch l'mincha erev Pesach. The Mishnah did not clarify what mincha we're referring to. Elyahu. So they asked in the yeshiva, Samuch l'mincha gedoyla tanan. Are we referring to Samuch l'mincha gedoyla? Again, on Daf Nun Ches, we did learn here in Pesachim that the earliest that they would begin bringing the Koren Tamid would be 12:30, 30 minutes after real Chatzos, after the middle of the morning and the night. Shois Mani is 12:30, and then Samuch l'mincha would mean from noon. Or maybe the Mishnah, this takana, is Samuch l'mincha ketana ketan. Mincha ketana is when they would normally bring the mincha, which would be 9.5 hours into the day, what we would call 3:30 p.m. Shois Mani yois, and therefore Samuch l'mincha would mean that this is sort of having a meal is only from 3 p.m. onwards. By the way, there's a very interesting Tosfos over here. Even though this is not the first time we're speaking about mincha, but it's dafke here in Pesachim, the last Tosfos in the Amid, that wonders why is mincha called mincha. This is a famous Tosfos. In other words, the word shachar means morning. So the davening of the morning is called shacharis. What's mincha? What's made mincha? It's beautiful. Now, so he brings over here that when we brought the Koren Tamid comes along with nesachim. Part of that is a flower offering. A flower offering is called a mincha. A mincha also means a gift. And Tosfos reminds us what we had in the beginning of brachas, that you can argue that the greatest tefillah is mincha. It's a gift. Why? Like we say in the Hayom Yom, because a person rips himself away from the work. Well, it's the morning, you didn't begin working yet. Might if you can daven before you go to sleep. Mincha, especially winters, mamash, middle of your workday. So that's the real gift. That has a special chashivah. It's beautiful. Anyways, va'ayin other details in the Tosfos. Okay, so which one is it? Now the Gemara will explain what will be the logic to say one side and what will be the logic to say the other side. Do we say samuch lemincha gedoyla tanan? And if that would be the meaning of the Mishnah, that indeed, why would Chazal make a takana not to have a proper meal as of noon? Umishum Pesach. That will be related to Pesach. Now that would also mean that's perhaps, not for sure, we'll see later, that perhaps when there is no Mizbeach, maybe this Gezeda won't be enforced, at least not as much as. What's the issue with a Korban Pesach? That if a person were to begin a meal by noon, and again, people didn't eat as often as they ate today, but when they ate, it was a whole big thing. They would unfasten their belt and they would sit down, they would be massive, and they would prolong the meal. A meal was a real big thing. And therefore, what's the issue? Dilma asi lim nimshach. You might get involved in the meal. That's Zayin on the days. And what might happen? V'asi li iminuye mila evad pescha. And you might, God forbid, forget or delay too much to bring a Korban Pesach. Another beautiful nuance in the top small Tosfos. Tosfos adds that if taka the reason was they don't want a meal because they were afraid that a meal will get in the way of offering the Korban Pesach, then one would counter argue, well, what happens if there's a Yid that already brought the Korban Pesach? He would also be included in the Gezeda, but the question is why? If he already brought the Korban Pesach, then what is the fear? So Tosfos says, "Vafilu achar sheyasa Pesach." Even there, we can learn pshat in the Mishnah that still it would be usher to have a meal. Kedei shelo yimayir lechel v'yasa Pesach shalei karo. It was if I would know that I'm allowed to have a meal the 14th in the afternoon, so people will say, no, let me just get the Pesach out of the way to be able to have a meal. Chazal didn't want that either. You can't eat anyways. You might as well bring the Pesach properly. That's one way of understanding the Mishnah. Top line in the Amid. Oidilma, no. And the latter is what we learned. The latter is the correct. Oidilma, samach, lemincha, ktana, ktana. That the Mishnah's meaning, mincha is mincha ktana. And mincha ktana again is 9.5 hours into the day. 3:30 is maniyah. Samach lemincha would mean only as of 3 p.m. Then it has nothing to do with the Korban Pesach. It has everything to do with matzah. Umishu matzah. And what is that? Dilma achle lemichla lamatzah achila gasa. Now, I just want to say like this. Achila gasa means excessive consumption. It's good to be aware that in halacha there are two madreges of achila gasa. You have a person that is already satisfied, and when they eat, since they're satisfied, they don't have pleasure anymore. That eating is called halachically, they ate, but it's not mitzvah min amuvchar. And that's when we learned at Ashbam, that if you have achila gasa, mitzvah min amuvchar, eat when you're hungry, when you enjoy the food. Just to know that there is a worse level, there's a more severe achila gasa. That achila gasa is that when a person feels so full, that if they eat more, they feel that it's just nauseating for them, right? It's not, that is halachically not even called achila. That's even worse. If a person were to have a achilas matzah on this higher level of achila gasa, then it wouldn't only be that they're not fulfilling the mitzvah achilas matzah min hamufchar. Then they would not. It's called halachically they didn't eat because their body is repulsed by that extra excess of food. So to prevent that from happening, don't eat a meal. Now for that, you can eat 12 o'clock. That's the presumption. You don't need all of those hours. But if you can't eat after 3 p.m., then yeah. Then over 3-4 hours, even if you're going to say this, the Haggadah very quickly, you for sure will not have an achila gasa on neither of these levels. Then you're going to have at least some level of hunger and you're going to have pleasure when you heap the matzah. Now the Rishonim speak out over here. Hold on. Yeah, I get it. I get this, not eating matzah b'achila gasa. But why didn't the Gemara also mention Pesach? Bisman habayis, you have a Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is rechet mitzvah tzes in the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach should also not be eaten, right, in a way where you call it excessive consumption. It's a big kasha this. Why are we focusing only on matzah? So the Rishonim explain, because the Gemara really is alluding to the nafkamina between the two sides. It's not only a question in the Gemara of whether it is samach lemincha gedola or samach lemincha ketana. Of course, that's the boya. That's a very practical boya. Is the issue as of 12 p.m. or only out of 3 p.m.? It's more than that. We want to know whether it's temple related or whether it's not temple related. Not because we're saying that if it would only be because of temple, because of the carbon related, then it would automatically fall to the sides during the tragic period of no mizbech. We're not saying that. There are many takanas that once it became asur b'zman habayis, it continues. We also have sometimes in Chazal the concept that mehedi yibana hamigdash, so to already be in the right habit. But still, there are many nafkaminas in halacha. If it's something temple related, then bisman there's no karbanis. It's definitely going to be at least less severe. And that's why the Gemara emphasizes that if it's mincha ketana, it's about matzah. It's also about the Korban Pesach. Bisman there is a mizbeach, but it's equally about the mitzvah of matzah, and therefore it has nothing to do with whether the Beis Hamikdash is standing or not. That's a very important nuance over here. Okay, so which one is it? Answers the Gemara. Amar Avina Toshema, come in here. Steht in Abraisa. Afilu agrifas hamelech. Veris das agrifas hamelech. So the Rashbam, 11 lines under the Gemara says, agrifas hamelech was melech kasher mi malchei chashmonoi. Now just be aware that the chashmonaim, the fact that they were malachim in itself was certainly not okay. We have another version that he brings that mimalchei hurdes, and that's a big nafkamina, whether he was a yid, chashmonaim were yidin, they were not kahanim, right? Hurdes was a goy, he was a Roman. So whichever one. The point is he was a melech kasher, and the Braisas were speaking about his MO, his lifestyle. Back inside the Braisa, shehu ragel le'echol, he would normally eat the first meal of his day. We're speaking about people who would eat 2 meals a day, b'teisha sha'os, in the 9th hour. Now, in the 9th hour is what we would call between 2 and 3 p.m. Not at the end, between 2 and 3. So says the Braisa that even if you have a person that eats his first meal then, nevertheless, oisoi hayoim means on Erev Pesach, even someone like him should not eat until it gets dark. Now, what's the raya? Says the Gemara. That our Mishnah is referring to mincha ketana tnan. That means that you cannot eat as of 3 p.m. So hainu revusei da agrifas. That's why there is a chiddush that we're saying over here that afilu agrifas hamelech. And there are 2 chidushim about agrifas. Number 1, he hasn't eaten a meal yet. Number 2, right? He's beginning before the zman of the isur, which he would eat b'teisha shos means between 2 and 3. So 1 second. So what's the problem? The problem is that an agrifas hamelach didn't eat for 1 hour. That's too little. He knew for sure his meal will extend beyond the 9th hour, and that will be the chiddush. That even though you are beginning bisman heter, since you know that you will extend into zman isur, so afilu this should not eat. Gewaldig. And Eli amrat that samuch lemincha gedola ktan, that no one is allowed to eat as of 12 p.m. So ma'iravu say agrifas. Who cares that his normal way of eating was to start very late every day? Chal isur alei meikara. It's already asur since noon. Like, why would there be even a havamina that you have to be machadesh that you can't? It's asur to eat since noon. Of course he can't eat since it gets dark. Is that raya that our Mishnah, the isur, the takanas chachamim, the enactment of not having a meal is only samuch lemincha ketana, and even someone who's going to begin a meal prior to it, if he knows for sure that his meal will extend beyond the limit of samuch lemincha, he may not even start his meal. The Gemara is not happy. The Gemara says, okay, Ella, what numbers then? So you explained it, right? Samuch lemincha means samuch lemincha ketana tanan. I still can ask a question. Soif, my revusei de agrifas. Still, why would we even need a brayser for this? Isura. We know for sure, like we explained, that his meal will extend into the zman or isur. And now the Rashbam Chevra, 2 lines in the widest lines, Right? Tomatas mani, Surah Koidim Shing Masudasa. Now, guys, we'll learn above the Afilu Rabbi Yosi. Let's go back to the beginning of Avri Pesachim. The Paulik Baf Sakas Erev Pesach Bereish Pirka. Omar, and he says, Shaloi lahafsik ma'achar shehischal echol beheter. Then we had that sheet in the beginning of the Perek, says that Rashbam, yes, we did. But that's only beginning beheter means that someone began a meal and they did not know when they began the meal that the meal will be extended. That is where Rabbi Yossi says, if it extends into Shabbos, you don't have to be mafsik. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, in our compromise of Poides Mapa. Masha Inkin, if a person is starting a meal and they know that the meal takes them 2 hours to eat, that's the Gemara's kasha. Then still there's no chiddush by saying that the Agrifas HaMelech cannot have his meal in his usual time. Because we know it's going to extend Samach Lamincha Ktana. Answers the Gemara, no, there is a chiddush. Mao, the Tema, one would have said that Teisha Shois La Agrifas is Ka'arba Shois Didan Damyein. In other words, we eat in the 4th hour of the day. We had this above, all the different shitas, and if you remember, if you ate nothing until I think the 6th hour, then it's like throwing a pebble or a rock in a bag of wine. We eat between 9 and 10 a.m. And when we eat in the morning, bachlal, it doesn't take away from the taiva of having matzah, because we ate in the a.m. So one would have thought that if someone eats his first meal between 2 and 3 p.m., their body, so to say, eats it up so strong, and even if the meal would extend beyond 3 p.m., it's the first meal. By the time that night comes about, they would be hungry. And now we're not saying that he should start 3 p.m. We're saying compounded with the fact that he began the meal between 2 and 3. Koidim zmani surah. Together with the fact that this is first meal of the day, then that's why you would have thought that he would be allowed to. So Kamash Malan, no, you may not. You may not. That Chazal said either it's because if he's going to eat that late, he might eat matzah achilagaso, or it's because of Oloi Plug. But there is Zicher Achidish, all based on Samach Lemincha, meaning Mincha Ketana, and indeed that is what we paskin, as we learned it in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara. Omar Rabbi Yosi or Omar Rabbi Asi, as the Rif has the Girsa. Avol, yeah, true, we can't have a meal, and a meal is comprised of bread. And again, you can't have matzah, you can't have chametz, I know. You can't have matzah, I know. But matzah shida you could have, and on that says the Mishnah, don't have it, Samach Lamincha, Avol metabel hu b'minei targimon. Metabel means to dip. That was the way people ate food. Everything was dipped into something else. A person is allowed to eat. Targima means refreshments. A person is allowed, let's begin with 2 steps, allowed and then recommended. Here it's allowed to have all types of refreshments after the Zman of Samach Lamincha Ketana. Why is that? Because if you are not eating bread, then you will not feel satiated. Speak to all the people today that don't touch any grains. So the whole issue is not to have matzah b'chilagasa or to have it in the positive, to have it mitzvah min hamufchar, to have it with an appetite. You can have meat all the way to the end of Shkia, up until Shkia, and you're still going to be hungry. You're not going to be satisfied. Not only may you, but furthermore, says Rabbi Zajac metabel b'yarke. He made a point, not that he was allowed to. He would eat vegetables. Why would he eat vegetables? Says the Rashbam, v'nira be'enai. I'm looking inside the Rashbam, 13, 12 lines before the bottom of the Amid, because the megarer liba lemechal, because it opens up your appetite. In other words, it's not only that you are allowed, adarabah, the whole goal is in order to eat the mitzvah of matzah, b'teyavain, mitzvah min hamufchar, have it with an appetite, adarabah, eat vegetables. People today, it's amazing. People today, their suda is a salad with a special grass sprinkled on top. Here, it makes you more hungry. It opens up your appetite. Back in the Gemara. Tanya Nami Yachim. Hashamish, a waiter, metabel b'bnei ma'ayin. We have a doctor with us. We're saying over here that eating intestines, specifically intestines, somehow stimulates your intestines. It makes you hungrier. It whets your appetite. So the waiter that was hired to give the people the su'udah at night, he would already begin feeding the people Erev Pesach, late in the afternoon, dafke b'nei ma'ayin, and the nois and lefnei archam after 3 p.m. Now, where do we have this concept that eating, if you know what to eat, not only will it not satiate you, but it's going to actually open up your appetite? Says the Gemara, as it says a pasuk in Yirmiyah, Niru lochem nir, plow for yourselves a furrow, and ba'al tizru el hakoitzim, right? But don't sow upon thorn bushes, guys. We have this pasuk, if I'm not mistaken, related to if you ate nothing in the morning and you only start eating 12 o'clock, 6 hours in the day. So then you're like sowing upon thorn bushes. The food won't make you feel satisfied. But when it says in the beginning, Niru lochem nir, plow for yourselves a furrow, what do we see? That before you plant the seed, you have to break through the ground. So that's the remez, that before you have a meal, you have to break through the stomach, you have to fakert, you have to eat something, and you have to know exactly what, whether it's something specific, b'chlal minei targima, anything other than products of the 5 grains, halachically will not fully satiate you, or whether it is dafka b'nei ma'ayin, or we'll see soon that wine also has that koyach. So says the Gemara, that Rava, have shasi chamra, kulei male yom of the Pesach. He would drink wine the entire Erev Pesach, a lot of wine. In order, again, it means for his appetite to open up, or in English, to whet his appetite. Why? The nechol matzah tfei lo urta, for him to have even more matzah at night. Now, there's a big to do amongst the Achrayim on the word tfei, because until now we understand that there is a mitzvah of having a kazayis, and we all know Shulchan Aruch that really, especially if you make a ka'ara, then the mitzvah men amufchar will be for you to have 5 kazaysim, because of when you make the bracha, so that you have 2 kazaysim, and then you have the kazayis for the sandwich, and then by the afikoymen again the max. But after that, muchaira, there's no more mitzvah. No, Rava wanted to eat matzah tfei. He wanted to be hungry, for him to have to eat, for him to enjoy eating a lot of matzah. Is mikan, even when you eat matzah on the night of Pesach, beyond the 5 kazaysim, or the minimum of the minimum of the minimum, based on the 1 kazayis matzah, even though you're not mechuyev to eat more, when you eat more, you're fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah. And this is so true, especially al pi Chasidus, al pi Kabbalah. And the Rebbe spoke about it, that the quality of Michlad de Mehemnusa and Michlad de Asfasa clearly is the whole Pesach. The Rebbe spoke about it. Even though halachically you're not mechuyev to. So there is still, you're doing a mitzvah, and you don't make a bracha. We spoke about this on the Toises because you're not mechuyev. By the sukkah, we spoke out, you're also not mechuyev to eat, but you're mechuyev to live in the sukkah. That's why we make a bracha. By sukkah, not by matzah. But when you eat the matzah, every bite of matzah is a mitzvah. And Amar Rabba, how do I know? From where did I learn the chamra migra gorer? And b'chlal, that's a Yiddish approach. The answer is not because I feel that it opens up my appetite. That's garnished. You need to have a source in the Torah that something opens up your appetite. That's why we needed that remez, at least from Yirmiyahu, Niru lochem nir. Rabba needs to have a raya that wine opens up his appetite, because the Tanan, guys, this Mishnah will be in Arvei Pesachim soon on Daf Kuf Yud Zayin, Daf Kuf Ches, that bein our koises halalu, zok the Rashbam. We're speaking like this between the first and the second cup. After Kiddush, before you drink the cup at the end of Magid, im rotza lishtois, if you want to drink more wine than Yishta, you may drink. However, says the Mishnah, bein shlishi l'revi, between the third cup, that means after you made the bracha and birchas hamazon, prior to you drinking the cup, after Hallel, lo yishta, you should not drink. You should not drink. Now, look inside. Let's read it at Rashbam. Ben koises halalu, ben arishon l'sheni, uben ashlishi l'shlishi. It's between the first and the second, on the second and the third. Then the Mishnah says you can drink. And why? So the Rashbam already adds, Bishum the Chamra, because wine, migrar gorer, it opens up your appetite. Obviously, this is only shayach prior to your meal. Now we eat, right? Let's word it this way. When you drink the third cup, it means you finished your meal, you finished benching. That explains the Mishnah. So prior to your meal, you can add to the cups. Post the meal, post benching, don't add to the cups. Now says the Gemara, second to line on the top, and if you're going to say that drinking wine has the quality of misatzoid, if it satiates you, then why would we be allowed to add to any of the dalat koisos? Now, the dalat koisos we have to drink. The fact that there are 2 koisos before the meal, that's part of the gezeres chachamim, takanas chachamim, takana. I get that. But why we should never be allowed to eat? Because in misasoy damay yishta haka achal lamatzah achila gasa. Right, the whole reason why we can't have a meal already out of Pesach is to eat the matzah with an appetite. Why would Chazal allow us to do something that would take away our appetite? Indeed, that's Rabbi Zajac Elishmamino that Migra regarded. I would like to share Bekitzer, a traditional story that many people say every year by the Seder. There are 2 versions of the story, as we have this in Sipurei Hasidim from Rabbi Levin, that the holy Baal Shem Tov wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. And we have a tradition that if he would have met Torah Chaim HaKadosh, Mashiach would have come. Be that as it may, his last leg in the journey was he came in the Sfarim state to Constantinople. That's Istanbul. And when he got there, all of the money that he thought he would need to get there, he went with his daughter Adol, and he went with one of his shamashim. And they had no money. And there was a wealthy person that saw a young woman, Adol, washing her clothing, L'Kavat Shabbos. That's the only thing she could have done, is to wash her father's shirt for Yom Tov. And he invited them to come over. And the holy Baal Shem Tov, because of this Gemara, drank a lot of wine. That's after fasting for a few days. They had no food. And the Baal Shem Tov went to sleep. So the host thought, stop, the Baal Shem Tov drank a lot of wine. He went to sleep. And the whole Maisa with the Baal Shem Tov during this Seder later was saying, there was a whole blood libel. And a miracle came about that night. But the whole Maisa began with the Baal Shem Tov drinking a lot of wine, farvas. Because of our Gemara, that wine opens up the appetite, and the goal is to eat matzah l'tiyavain. So dafkan, don't eat what will make you full, and eat or drink that which will make you even have a desire to have matzah, and you'll have the mitzvah l'taiva. To be continued. All right. Second, we got another 30 minutes.
We start earlier today?
I put it in the chat, Baruch. We started 10 minutes earlier because we're doing 2 daf.
Okay. If somebody can put that Zoom up so I can get the first 10 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Well, we got one more. No. Baruch, we got another daf. Don't run away.
Oh, okay, good. Great.
All right. Wow. Chavra, with the help of Hashem, we are learning PESACHIM Daf Kuf Ches. And we will be learning about fasting on that of Pesach. We will have, not in the Gemara, but we're going to have the source of kindness B'chayres today in Tosfos, from based on a Masechta Soifrim. We're going to open up the whole sugya of reclining, of Hasava, right? And we're going to see what we eat in a reclined position, what do we not eat in a reclined position, whether we need to recline when we drink the dalat koisos, against the machlokes, but only during 2, and we don't know which one of the 2 you have to recline in, so we end up reclining by all of them. We're going to discuss who is exempt from reclining. We're going to learn about women when it comes to their mechiyuv of drinking the arba koisos. We're going to learn various dinim of arba koisos. We're going to learn again, we had this in Brachas Daf Nun Aleph, the sugya of kedei mezigas hakois, that the wine in the times of Chazal was very concentrated, and normally you would put the 3 parts water to 1 part wine. In other words, that's a ratio. A fourth of what you had in your cup was really real, pure, concentrated wine. 3/4 was made out of water, which means, based on what we learned in the last year, that you have to have a revius. You have to drink roiv revius, but you use a cup of a revius. So how much pure wine do you have? For each cup, a roiva revius of pure wine. Or really, for the dalet koisos, you'll have a total of a full revius. We're going to learn about someone who drank the dalet koisos pre-diluted, concentrated. We're going to learn about a person who drank the arba koisos 1 cup after the other, and many other rules, and much, much more. Without any further ado, Chavra, Daf Kuf Ches, we are up to 5 lines from the top of the Amid. We are continuing to learn about the importance, and that's about not surmira. Don't eat samach lemincha ketana, and eat matzah l'tiyavin. We learn to eat, drink things that will open up your appetite. So it's take steps to eat the matzah with greater appetite. So Rab Sheshes, another detail in this, have a Yosef B'tanis or Kol Maliyam of the Pischa, you would fast out of Pesach. And the reason why he fasted out of Pesach was to eat with appetite. Now the Gemara says, one second, why did he do that? The whole out of Pesach? Maybe, I'll tell you why. We had in yesterday's daf and daf Kuf Zayin, what did we have a question whether the mincha means mincha gedol or mincha ketana? Maybe that Kosav Rab Sheshes, that our mincha is not the way we determined, but it is samuch lemincha gedol ketan. Which means that the Isur of the Chachamim was not to eat already from noon. And why did they say that if that would be the meaning of the Mishnah, as we spoke out in the last daf, Umishum Pischu, is because we want to not get involved in a meal that will disturb our involvement in the offering of the Korban Pesach, as we spoke out, because Dilma Mimshach, you'll be involved. It's going to be Moishach you. You'll be involved in the meal. When you won't bring the Pesach, and also as we learned in the Tosfos on Kuf Zayin Amud Beis, even if you brought the Pesach, you might rush through it to have the meal. So maybe that's step number one. Step number two, and the Savaran Rab Sheshes holds Kihad Amar Rab Oishia Amar Rab Elazar that Machshir Hoya Ben Beseira BePesach Sheshachatu Shachris BaArba Asar Lishmoi. There is this one shita that holds that this man of bringing the Korban Pesach is not in the afternoon, and ideally after the Talmud Shel Bein Arbaim. No, that you can bring the Korban Pesach already in the morning. The parenthetically, the Lishmoi is, if you remember, that any Korban Pesach that's brought Shaloi B'Zmanoi, Adarabba, we don't want you to bring it L'Shem Pesach. We want you to bring it L'Shem Shlamim, and then it's going to be a good Shlamim. But during this man of the Pesach, if you bring it L'Shem Shlamim, it's not good. And this Ben Beseira holds that already from the morning, that's the Zman of a Pesach. In other words, Umitzafra Zman Pesach. Because this Shita holds, Ben Beseira holds, the Kulei Yoyme Chazi LePescha. And why is that? Because he holds that the Torah says the words Bein Ho'arbayim, which he understands to mean Ben Erev the Esmel, Erev the Ha'idna. So number one, two steps. Step number one, Rab Sheshes understood our Mishnah to be referring to Mincha Gedoyla. In other words, the Isur is all about don't eat when you can bring the Pesach. And number two, he'll subscribe to Ben Beseira, the Pesach can be brought from the morning. So based on that, Rab Sheshes didn't eat from the morning. That's the reason why he fasted. Says the Gemara, no. Amri loy. That's not the reason. You know why? Because when we learned in Daf Kuf Zayin that when the Mishnah says Samuch min mincha, don't eat, it means mincha ketana. No one says otherwise. Now, back to the kasha. Why didn't he eat in the morning? We said good. Why not mincha ketana? To eat matzah l'teyavin. Shani Rab Sheshes, the Istin Asava, he was a delicate person. He didn't eat that much. And he knew himself, and this is now subjective, that the ta'im b'tzafra midi, if he would eat, and midi means, it's not only that he didn't have bread, if he would have anything, lo urta, lo yahave, mahane, le michle, the food would not please him. It wouldn't give him anah. So that's why Rab Sheshes fasted every Erev Pesach. In other words, when a person begins learning the sugya, what comes to your mind? Oh, fasting Erev Pesach, Tainus B'choros. The Gemara clarifies that's not the reason. Actually, we won't find in Gemara any mention of Tainus B'choros. But look inside the second Tosfos. Right, I'm going a little bit in. The Habachoros no hagu. It's a minig. Erev Pesach, and we actually have a minig that if you are a parent to a child pre-bar mitzvah, then you also fast for yours on behalf of your son. Diktani, and this is based on the Masechta Soifrim, and says she'ein misanan benisan ella habachoros be'erev Pesach. And just bekitza, the big kasha is, where do we find that there is a fast day that's lechatchila broken by making a siyum? You won't find such a thing. Only by Tainus B'choros. Where do we get that from? If it's a minute to fast, so fast. And just to explain like this, that the reason why we fast is Zecher L'neis, that our firstborn were saved by Hashem, unlike the B'chorim of the Egyptians. The Zecher is done through the Siyum. The fact that you have to make a Siyum, that in itself is a Zecher. And there are many other very interesting lumdish approaches just explaining where do we find such a thing, that you are circumventing a fast day by making us, and that the truth be told, there is such a thing. Perhaps there are certain people that have a minhag to fast on the day of the yard site of a parent, but they make a siyum. I think if they make a siyum, they don't fast anymore. But anyways, this is the minhag Yisrael, and if a person asks where is that from, so here you know it's from the Sechtas Soifrim, as Tosfos brings down. 2 dots. Also going back, we're continuing to explain, to expound the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Tesamad Beis, the first Mishnah of the 10th Perek, where the Mishnah says that Rafilo Anashu Yisrael lo yochel ad sheyesev. And when we learned the Mishnah, we spoke out, just to repeat. Nowadays, we eat tables and chairs. Going back at a certain point in history, the common way of eating is you mamish sat on the ground, not on the ground. There were carpets, there were some cushions, but you didn't sit the way we sit. You were already in a semi-laying position, and you would recline. And Adarabba, who would not sit in such a position? Avadim, non-free people that don't have the time to properly sit down to eat. Eating, reclining was the way of a free man and woman. Now, there is a mitzvah to recline, as we learned in the Mishnah, as the Gemara will further speak about. But there are 2 aspects to it, and we should appreciate that. This is derech cherus, this is the way of a free person. And also is very important because for us, leaning might even be a little bit uncomfortable. Today, it's not a symbol of freedom, but many things that we do on the night of the Seder is to reenact, to go through the steps of what happened then. Since then they ate in a reclined level, that is a reason to eat right now. Okay, let's learn inside over here. Itmar we learned. Matzah, sarech haseva. Matzah has to be eaten reclined, says the Rashbam. Because, I'm reading the Rashbam, because matzah is zecher legeula. Now that's a bomba Rashbam. Halachma anya, right? What happened to the Haggadah, the Achol Avosana? True, but matzah is also matzah zusha anoich lemal shuma. That's the end of the Seder Rabban Gamliel. It's for shalei hispik b'tzeka shalav zayin lahachmitz achenigdalei melach malach hakadosh baruch hu v'ga'olam. So matzah is connected to geula, and basically the logic that we know is anything that's connected to geula must be eaten reclined, and anything that's connected to the shibud should not be eaten b'haseva. Next,
why are we taught, Rabbi? Why are we taught that it's the mitzvah to recline if it was the norm back then? If it was normal to recline when you eat, so the mitzvah should be to eat.
Because some people
you were already reclining.
No, I get it. Some people, there's normal, and then you have to do it. You have to do it. Shabbos, you have to have meat. Of course. Okay, but not of course. You might both not have meat, not have meat.
People eat meat, so you're saying it's a mitzvah to eat meat. Okay.
And mother ain't tzarech haseva. Why? I'm reading the Rashbam, the end of the narrow line. Shu zecher la'avdus. Now, so we got the matzah, clear, klud. We got the mother, klud. What about the wine? Yayin, ooh. So we have 2 versions of what Rav Nachman said, one opposite the other. Itmar mishmei de Rav Nachman. Yeah, tzarech haseva. You have to lean when you drink the wine. The itmar. In the name of the same Rav Nachman, ain't tzarech haseva. Not that we have a break, a corruption in the tradition. No, says the Gemara. We're not arguing. Depends on which 2 cups. Now the problem is we forgot which 2, which 2 not. And there's a logic for each side. And says the Gemara, some people say it on one side, at least it's relatively simple. It's either the first 2 or the last 2. We could have had many other options. And the Gemara explains, meaning, that Rav Nachman says that you have to recline dafka when you have the first 2 cups. Why? Because now is when we are beginning. Now is when freedom begins. In other words, since we're having the first 2 cups prior and post Magid, and even though Magid begins with Metchila Oivdi Avodah Zarah Hayav Yiseinu, but just some Chasidus, Ashgacha Pratis, we're learning this in Parshas Kisisa, the Alter Rebbe, Smoiloi Tachas L'Roishi, the whole Torah out of this Parsha, the Alter Rebbe says, amazing, that don't learn Pshat, that there's first Gevura, and then there's Chesed. First, moiloi tachas l'roish, and then v'yimina tichapkeni, says the Alter Rebbe that by the Oibishten, in the Gevura itself, there's already the chesed. In the smoiloi, there's the yamin. In the beginning of the Golus, there's already the Geula. So the beginning already is the end. Like the Rebbe speaks about why is it that the Shibud is in Parsha, is in the Chumash Shemois. Chumash Shemois is Chumash HaGeula. So the Torah should have put the story of the Shibud, Parsha Shemois, should have been in Bereshis. That's the same Nakuda that Rebbe writes. Because the seeds of redemption is in the Shibud. So that's the Gemara over here. That the beginning has the Geula. However, today, Kosa Basroi Loi Bo'u HaSeva. Here's Semach. Not you can't. You don't need to. Because we already finished with the story. Maida Hava. Gavaldik. Azal logic. Maida Hava. Says Toisvis, Maida Hava. What about matzah? We're having matzah after the recounting of the story. That's a bumper question. Look inside. Let's read it. We have time. Even though it's already a Shekfar Amru Gula, Va'af al gav the matzah tzricha seva, and v'lo yomer Maida Hava. Toisvis gives 1, 2, 3, a mountain of answers. Number 1, Shani matzah she'ikar sudas yosem yayin. That's the main suda. The main suda you have to have by seva. Okay. Va'oid biyayin hesev kvar b'shtei koisos harishonim. You already did a seva. By matzah, I know that you're only beginning it after the magid, but you didn't have any matzah yet. Va'oid, because the Torah writes al matzah zeichel lechedos. And ba'ayin b'toisvis. Okay, back over here. However, the Amrilah, others said that Rav Nachman said it, Lahagisa, that Adar Abatrei Kosem Basroi Boya Seva. Why is that? Because the Hahi Shata Havokavia, because the Hahi Shata to Kahavia Cherus. In other words, only when you complete the narrative are you fully free. Let's go through what we mentioned before, that we're not only relating, we are reenacting. Reenacting means that ideally when we say that we went into the Golus, we should experience the Tsar. We have the mother to taste the bitterness. So when do we experience the freedom? Only at the end. So then recline at the end. However, today, because the akate avodim hayinu ka'amar. That's the word. Since we're saying avodim hayinu, and the goal is not just to say a story, but to experience the story, so then you're still an Eved. Oh, so now the Gemara says, what do we do? So we don't know what Rav Nachman said. So it says the Gemara, Hashta the itmar hachi, the itmar hacheh. You know what you do? So be meisiv always. I suffered the Rabbanan lo hakel. Oh, there's so much to speak out over here. Or the way Toisvis says, hold on, if the din of Haseva by all Dalet Koises is based on a doubt, says Toisvis, what happens? Im shachach v'loy heisev. If you didn't recline, do you have to drink again? The whole thing to begin with is a doubt. I also want to speak out one more sugya when we're going to run further, is that the Brisker Rav, the Griz, that's his famous question, is Haseva a din bifnei atzmai, or is Haseva a detail of the mitzvah? So God says, eat matzah. And the Chachamim says, eat matzah while you're reclining. And if you don't recline, you're missing in the matzah. Or, again, the first option is, the matzah is perfect. There's a din of Haseva. We'll be medayik in the Gemara soon, one way or the other. Okay, another din. Perakdon. Perakdon means person laying on their back. Perakdon, lo yishmei Haseva. Laying on your back is not called reclining. Another din, Hasevas Yamin, if you lean on your right, you recline on your right, lo yishma Haseva, that's not called reclining. And the lo yoid, elo shema yagdam kan elevation, if a person, we'll see which one it refers to, either eats perakdon or eats leaning to the right, maybe the windpipe, the kanem, will somehow position itself prior to the vesha, to the esophagus, and then the food and the drink, God forbid, will go down the windpipe, v'yavil de sakana. I know that when we learn this, we always apply this to the leaning to the right, but it's important to point out that the Rashbam says, right on the white lines, he quotes Rabbeinu Shloima, that was the Rashi, and he says that Rashi holds the danger is only eating laying on your back. There's a machlekes in the Rishonim. When is there the sakana? Laying on your back, this is a medical question. Is there a higher chance that if you eat, the food and the drink will go into your windpipe, or is it leaning to the right? Okay, back inside the Gemara. Now, another din. The Isha Eitzel Baila Loy Boye Haseva. A woman who is sitting with her husband doesn't need to recline. The Rashbam, 4 lines before the bottom, brings from the She'il Toys of Rabbi Choy that says the lav, the rochayu, the nashi lemizka, because it's not the way of women to recline. They didn't recline. That goes back to Tzemach. There was a way of sitting down, not reclining. There was a way of sitting, not reclining. Now again, our derech nowadays, no one reclines, ain't a chanami. But my great grandfather, he did recline, but my great grandmother did not. So we're speaking about reenacting. Women never ate reclined. Okay. Now, but if she's a prominent woman, then she has to recline, because in those days, chashuv, a woman did eat reclined. Weiter. Bein etzel aviv. What about if a son is eating with his father? Why would that change anything? So it says that Rashbam. Yeah, Baruch, you're asking something.
Yeah. Did the women then eat like evedim, like the eveds? Did the women then consider?
No, they didn't eat like eveds, but something in between, Baruch. It's good to be a woman in the 21st century, that's for sure. Okay. Now, what about a son with his father? So here, there's another issue, that when we are eating in the presence of another, to whom we are subservient, to whom we should have a certain amount of awe and respect, that frees us from reclining, because it's almost disrespectful to act like the groise knackedike free man in the presence of someone to whom you have a certain amount of respect and awe. So here we go. So bein etzel aviv, yes, boya haseva. Oh, correct. We have a kibbut avim and there's moira and all of that, but it doesn't take away the mitzvah of reclining. However, what they wanted to know was Talmud etzel rabbi. And the reverence that a Talmud should have for his teacher is greater. So does he have to recline in the presence? So Tashema, we have here the Amar, the Dalit from the Mesilas Hashas, the Amar Abaye, that Kaviran Beimat. When we were by Rabbah, this is such a Gavaldik Gemara. When we learned in the Talmidei Rabbah, so then Zoginon Abirkei Hadadi, we would recline. Now, details, how did we recline? We would lean on each other's knees. I don't know if you have this image. I remember my father, of blessed memory, he would have that chair with the 2 handles for his arms, and then my mother would put a pillow. It would be so uncomfortable. It would recline. And if you don't have what to lean on, then you lean on your neighbor. Or they leaned on their neighbors. They did lean. However, Abaye says when we went to the new yeshiva, Ki Asina L'Bei Rabbi Yosef, I don't mean new yeshiva. Let me correct myself. What did we learn at the end of Masechta Brachas? Remember that Rabbi Yosef didn't want to be Rosh. He wanted to live. So Rabbi became the Rosh Yeshiva, the Oiker Harim. After Rabbi passed away, then Rabbi Yosef became the new Rosh Yeshiva. So when we were then under Rabbi Yosef and we were reclining on our lawn, Rabbi Yosef says, Lo tzirichtu. You don't have to recline anymore. You know why? Because Moira Rabba Moira Shamayim. Wow, how great is that? How is that? Right? That's the whole Es Hashem Alekecha Tira. Es. We darshan the es l'Rabbis Tamid Chachamim. You can argue.
By your father, you do recline, but by your Rebbe, you don't recline.
Depends which Rebbe. Let me add something. If it's an Oiker Harim, then you recline. If it's a Sinai, guys, the Sinai's, that's the big machloikas between Abanim and Rosh Yeshivas. For Oiker Harim, big deal. So he's smart. So he can say alumdus. He doesn't know all the information. All right. Meisvei. Akasha and Shitas Rabbi Yosef. And Rabbi Yosef says that a Talmud does not recline. It says explicitly in Abraisa, Im hakoil or the mesav, you always should recline. Vafilu Talmud eitzel rabbi. Clear. Says Gemara, no. Kitanya he does that. That Braisa doesn't mean a Talmud by a Rebbe of Torah. Is Bishulya did not got a apprentice of carpenters. You are learning. You're doing. You're spending time learning a trade. So he's like your Rebbe. But for that Rebbe, there you still have to recline. But if someone teaches you Torah, there's a vertel that everything can be speaking about a Rebbe. Or that Braisa says Talmud Eitzel Rabbi. But certain people, when they go to the Rebbe, all they want to learn is the Chetzonizdike things. What sucks? Rebbeische sucks. Gesha sucks. Right? The Spitz Chabad. And the Rebbe went with that the knetch like that in the head. For that type of student, that's not enough. If you learn Torah, then Then you have real reverence, says Rabbi Yosef, and then you don't recline. And lahoyer, that if they were eating the matzah in the Beis Hamikdash, that's a Gemara in Menachos that speaks about using the kohanim, using the menachos from matzah. People ask them, and the sugya menachos, this is a word I forgot from whom, that how can the Gemara even speak about a menachos? You eating in the Azara, you can only eat standing. The only people that consider the Azara are malchus based, malachim that come from the dynasty of King David. So how can there be a havamin of eating the mitzvah of matzah by kohanim of menachos when you can't recline? The answer is that in the holy temple you are in the presence of God. There's a Gilui Elikus, and whenever there's a Gilui Elikus, that's what we're learning today. You don't have to recline. Beautiful. Okay, weiter. 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, Shamish Mai. What about a Shamish? Interesting. A Shamish is the waiter. The waiter is subordinate, but he's not inherently subordinated to the people who he's servicing. No, he obligated himself to perform service to them. Unlike a Talmud to his Rebbe, a Chassid to a Rebbe, there's an inner previous dekabitul. So is he exempt from reclining or not? Is he mechoiv to recline or not? So Tashema, the Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Hashamish she'ochal kizayis matzah kishuhu mesev, then he's yotzal. End of quote. What does that imply? Mesev in, loy mesev loy. Indeed, shma mino, that boy haseva, shma mino. Now that we quoted Rabbi Shua ben Levi, continues the Gemara, ve Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. I want you to know that Noshim, Chayavois, Ba'arba Koisas Halalu. But before we take a step back now, that we already knew that by the fact that we needed to say that women don't have to recline. But now that's the Gemara does it many times that way. Women are obligated in Dalot Koisas. Why is that? This is a very important statement. Sha'af hein hoyu ba'oisa hanes, because they were part of the miracle of leaving Mitzrayim. Now we have a big machloikis what this means. We have the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, this is so important, that they were the protagonists of leaving Mitzrayim. Not that they were there. And he quotes from the Sechta Soita that B'schar Noshim Tzidkonoyos Shehoya Ba'oisa Hador Nigo Alu. And the same time the Rashbam says that when we bring by Mikra Megillah, that women are obligated, and the words are Sha'af Ein Hoyu, it's not only because they were there and they were beneficiaries, is because they were the protagonists. Esther brought about the miracle. Or when we have by Chanukah Yehudis, we learned she brought about the miracle when she killed their main general, V'chulei. Tosfos disagrees with that. Tosfos says that Pashit, no, Af Hein Hoy Vaisanes is Kapshutai. It's not because he's not debating the fact that they were the ones that brought it about, but you don't need that. I want people to know, what about Sukkah? Everyone asks, what Sukkah is? Yes, Sukkah is because we left Mitzrayim. Why aren't women obligated to sit in the Sukkah? Guys, it's important. This is only used on the Rabbanans, not on the Oraisas. It's late, but at least we got the words. Yerushalmi, you were asking something. We have 8 minutes to learn the whole Amid.
I got the answer from Danny. Protagonist, just a word that you know.
Do you think he is a Brazilian? I also weiß gar nicht. I'm repeating this gesagt. And I promise you, I pronounce this word wrong many times. Danny corrected it enough times. Baruch Hashem, so far so good. Okay, top line. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Let's start quoting many rules of Shmuel. Rule number 1. A nice cup, guys. Brachos daf nun aleph. Like this. Wine then was very concentrated. It was normally diluted 3/4 water to 1/4 wine. So says Shmuel that when it comes to arba koisos, you need to have enough pure wine is needed to make a nice cup. Now we're going to learn Dafke Rashi, not Rashbam. The Havamina is that what Shmuel is saying is you need to make one nice cup, you need to have 1/4 of a revius. Havamina is you need 1/4 of a revius for all of the dalit koises. You need only 1/16 of pure wine for each cup. That's the Havamina, and then we'll understand how the Gemara has a kasha, and then we'll clarify that that's not what Shmuel meant. But that's how we're going to learn it right now. That you need for the total of the dalit kaisos, the amount of pure wine that's needed, kedei mezigas kais yafa, which is a quarter of a revius for all four. Statement number 2, shasa'an chai, if you drank all the 4 cups, but you drank them all pure wine undiluted. So there you're yoitza. You fulfilled your obligation. Statement number 3, shasa'an bebas achas. Bebas achas, chavra, does not mean in the same cup. Then you just drank 1 big cup. Bebas achas means you drank 4 cups, but you didn't drink it the way we're supposed to drink them, 1 after Kiddush, and then after Magid, then after benching, then after Halal. You drink 1, 2, 3, 4. Ki'ilu Sudas Mashiach when you're in a rush. You cannot, it takes you to Atzilus right away. If you did that, you're Yotzam. Another din. If you did not drink the entire cup, you shared from your cup to your family members, right, then you are Yotzam. Now, guys, we did learn this in the last daf about there is a need to drink, like we said, Shitas Rashbam, someone should drink, or some total Latoisvis should drink the Meloy Lugma. Fine, that's what the Gemara is saying over here. I don't care that you did not drink the entire Revis. Okay, now the Gemara will go step by step explaining what Shmuel says. Step number 1, Shmuel said, Shason Chai Yotza, that you're a Yotza, even though it was undiluted. Let's clarify that. We're not debating Shmuel, we're just clarifying. Omar Rava, Yedeyayin Yotza. Yedeyayin Yotza, says Rashbam, you drank the dalit koises, but Yedei Cherus la Yotza. In other words, the concept of mitzvah min hamufkar, or Rashbam uses the words mitzvah shalema. If you have to drink reclined, so then they were drinking what you think free man drank such wine. No, they did not. So you didn't fulfill mitzvah shalema. Next statement, we were late. Shason b'basachas, you drank 4, one after the other. So again, Shmuel says you're Yaitza. So here again, we have either Rav, and the Rif and the Rosh takes out Rav. So let's go. Rav Amar, that Yotza, Yedayayin Yotza. Yedayayin Yotza means that Rashbam says Simchas Yomtiv. But Yedei Arba Koises La Yotza. Wow. According to our version here, by Chai, you fulfilled Dalet Koises, not Min HaMufchar. If you drank 1 cup after the other, says the Rashbam, then you did not drink 4 cups. You did not fulfill the rabbinic obligation of drinking 4 cups. It's as if you drank 1 big cup. And the Rashbam adds, you have to bring 3 more cups and to drink them on the Seder. So holds the Rashbam. Just to note that many Rishonim argue with this. You have the Rabbeinu David that has a different girsa in the Gemara, and he says that Seder Dalet Koises L'Yotza. That's a very big machlekes. Let's go weiter. Okay, next. Hishka mehen l'barabreisa Yotza Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak v'hu the Ishtei Ruba the Kasa, provided that at least the Malay Lugma was consumed, like we spoke out. Now, the Gemara, what we did not explain yet was the first statement of Shmuel. And again, we learned it the way Rashi learns it, that he seemed to be saying that you only need a quarter of a revius of pure wine for all of the Dalet Koises. And on that, Meisvei from Abraisa says Dalet Kois Alolu, Tzarech Sheyehi Bahen, Kidei Revius, there has to be, in all 4, you're going to have a total of 1 revius of pure wine. In all 4, you're going to have a total of 1 revius of pure wine, which means every cup should have a quarter of a revius, which is normally what happened. And that's the kasha on our initial understanding. Another din, echad chai ve'echad mazuk. In other words, each time you drink, you have to drink a full revius, or roiv of the full revius, but you have to have in front of you a revius. Now, ideally, it should be mazuk. If it's chai, that's another statement that Shmuel said, then you're yatsa, with all the nuances that we added. Another din that we have in this brayso that we will challenge, echad chadash ve'echad yashin. Guys, here, chadash means like grape juice, wine that's not fully intoxicating, it's still very fresh. And yashin means also that it's not intoxicating, it got old, so it's ausgewebt in Yiddish. It got weakened. That's the way that Rashbam teaches. Doesn't matter if it's not alcohol content. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he argues with this last statement of echad chadash ve'echad yashin. And he says, no, tzarech sheyibeib of tam umar yayin. So therefore, the Rashbam says it cannot be chadash nor yashin. Now, Mare Yayin we'll see is red. Oh, so let's go. So first of all, Tani as it says in the beginning of the Braisa, and we don't even have a machlokes on this, that Kidei Revius, that the sum total of the Dalet Koises has to be a Revius of pure wine. Va'at Omrat Kois Yafa, right? That you need for all the Dalet Koises, all of them together, just in a quarter of a Revius. So the Gemara says, no, you misunderstood the first statement of Shmuel. In other words, you have to have for each cup of the Dalet Koises, a quarter of a revius of pure wine. That my kidei mizikas kois yafa the ka'amar, coming meaning on Shmuel, l'chol chad v'chad, I have a l'kol revius. I want to chop another few lines. Now that we quoted the Braisa, and Rabbi Yehuda says, you can't have yain chadash, you can't have yain yashan. Why not? Because tzarech sheyehei boy both tam. It has to have the flavor of wine, and that includes alcoholic content. Umare and red has to be red wine. Amarava. My time of Rabbi Yehuda, because since it says in Mishlei regarding someone who's overindulging in wine, it says Al Teira Yayin, don't set your sight on wine. Ki is Adem, right? That is red, because that's really when wine is chashuv. So from here we oversee that fakert, that what's the chashivus of wine, that it intoxicates and that it should be red. Mikan, don't have grape juice. The Taz, the Kitzur says, because of the blood libels, the Taz says, don't have red wine. Imagine, Galus dinim. We, Baruch Hashem, are not afraid of a blood libel now, and we dafka have red wine to the point that if you have white wine, add some red in it. And Al Pi Chasidis, this is very important, that white is chesed, and red is gevura. And we not drink all the Dalet Koises Bahas Seva, first two, last two, because the yain, some of it is connected to Cherus, and Yiddishkeit, the Yisoid of freedom, is Dafke Gevura. We find God, ben that freedom doesn't mean Hefkerwelt. That's chaos. Freedom is red, Gevura, following God's limit in God's rules. That is exactly where we find freedom. To be continued.